The courtroom was hushed in the way only old buildings knew how to beware. Silence clung to wood-paneled walls, and history breathed through every creaking bench. You could hear the scratch of pens, the distant buzz of fluorescent lights, and the slow, rhythmic shifting of people too afraid to move. But in that silence sat a girl barely 8 years old with a yellow dress and a voice the world hadn't heard in 2 years. Her name was Malia. She looked impossibly small behind the witness stand, her legs swinging just above the floor, her arms wrapped tightly around a frayed stuffed elephant whose seams had split and been restitched too many times to count. She looked like every little girl who had once danced barefoot in the summer sun. Except she wasn't, because no child who'd lived Malia's life looked like every little girl. Her mother, Nadia Fields, sat at one side of the courtroom, shoulders squared, chin trembling. Her fingers gripped a crumpled tissue so tightly it seemed like she might tear it in half. Beside her, Attorney Carolyn Burke watched every detail with the hawk-eyed intensity of someone who knew the law but also knew pain. Carolyn had seen custody battles, but nothing like this. On the other side of the room sat Dean Fields, Malia's father. His face was pale, his shirt collar too tight, his hands restless on the polished oak table. There were no tears in his eyes, just sweat, just nerves. He'd been ordered to stay silent unless questioned, and it was clear that silence was doing far more damage than words ever could. But Malia wasn't looking at either of her parents. Her wide, searching eyes were fixed on something far more familiar. At the edge of the courtroom, just beyond the swinging gate that separated the formal space from the gallery, lay a golden retriever. His name was Baxter. He was 8 years old, with eyes like twilight and a red service vest strapped around his chest that read in bold letters, "Service animal, do not disturb." Baxter wasn't a pet. He wasn't a trick dog or family mascot. He was something more profound, was the reason Malia had made it through the last 2 years. The reason she hadn't shattered. When therapists failed, when medications dulled her but didn't heal her, when sleep came only in moments stolen from fear, Baxter had been there. Not just to comfort, but to remember, to listen to a silence no one else could hear. Miss Malia came the voice of Judge Helena Ryan, iron-willed woman in her 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a record of ruling by precedent rather than pity. But today, there was a softness to her voice, a gentle tremble that belied how heavy her robe felt on her shoulders. "You don't have to speak if you're not ready," she continued, eyes kind but firm. "You can nod, or shake your head, or use your hands. However you feel safest, child." Malia didn't nod. She didn't shake her head either. She just looked at Baxter. Her small fingers loosened slightly from her stuffed elephant and rose. It was a tiny motion, easy to miss if you weren't looking. A faint circle in the air with her pinky once, twice. Baxter's ears perked. He stood, and without hesitation, the dog trotted up the aisle, walked past the benches and gallery rail, and sat beside Malia. Upright, calm, steady. He didn't nuzzle her or demand affection. He simply faced the courtroom. A second movement. Malia tapped her chest, 2 quick, deliberate taps. Baxter barked. Once. The room froze. Every eye turned. A clerk's pen dropped. A juror gasped. Even Judge Rowe sat up straight, her gavel motion forgotten midair. "What does that mean?" she asked, but not to Malia. She turned her gaze toward the back of the courtroom, where a woman in a charcoal gray suit rose slowly from her seat. Dr. Simone Carter, Malia's psychologist, stepped forward. She looked shaken, not because she hadn't expected it, but because it meant Malia was ready. Truly ready. "That's their signal, Dr." Carter said softly. "We've worked on it for over 6 months. Malia can't always speak what she remembers, but she remembers everything. That was her saying she's ready to tell you, and that there's something you need to see." Judge Rowe blinked. "Approach," she said. The psychologist walked to the bench and handed the judge a sealed envelope. "Malia gave this to me yesterday. She told me, if Baxter barks once, you give this to the judge." The judge opened it slowly. Inside was a single drawing, hand-colored in crayon on school-grade construction paper. It showed a little girl crouched in the corner of a room, hands over her ears, her eyes squeezed shut in terror. Above her loomed a man tall, angry mid-shout, and beside her, drawn with shaky but clear strokes, stood Baxter barking, body positioned as if shielding her. Judge Rowe flipped the paper. On the back, written in trembling block letters, were 8 devastating words. He says he loves me, but I'm only safe when he's not near. There was a collective inhale, a gasp that swept through the gallery like wind through trees. Dean Field stood up. "This is absurd," he snapped. "She could have drawn that about a cartoon. That dog is trained. Anyone could." "Sit down." Judge Rowe's voice rang like thunder. He froze. The bailiff moved closer. Judge Rowe turned back to Malia. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice low. Malia didn't look at her father. She didn't look at her mother. She looked at Baxter. Then she spoke. Her voice cracked from disuse, but it was clear, honest. "Baxter knows who keeps me safe," she whispered. "He remembers when I couldn't. He kept the scary away." Silence. Even the court reporter forgot to type. Judge Rose sat back in her chair. For a long time, she didn't say a word. Then she looked at Malia's mother. "Ms. Fields, I'm granting you full custody. Effective immediately. You'll work with family services to ensure continued counseling. But there is no question in my mind." Tears burst from Nadia's eyes. She reached for her daughter, but didn't move from her chair. Dean Fields opened his mouth, but the bailiff had already stepped in. Judge roasted slowly. Her hands gripped the sides of her bench as she looked one final time at the girl in the yellow dress, her stuffed elephant, and the dog who had just said more in a bark than most adults say in a lifetime. "You've done more today, Malia, than I've seen grown men do under oath," she said softly. "And you, Baxter." She set down her gavel not in judgment, but in reverence. 6 months later, the sun hung warm over the park, dappling the pavement in gold and shadow. Malia sat on a bench beneath the big oak tree, sketchpad in her lap, her fingers moving in colored pencil lines that told stories the world still hadn't heard. Baxter lay beside her, relaxed but alert. A little boy wandered over, no more than 5. "Can I pet your dog?" he asked. Malia looked up. She smiled. Not a shy smile. Not forced. A real one. "You can," she said, her voice stronger now. "But ask him first." The boy blinked. "Ow!" She tapped her chest twice. Baxter barked once and wagged his tail. The boy giggled. And for the first time in years, Malia laughed too. Not the polite kind. Not the wounded kind. A laugh that echoed. A laugh that said healing was real. That the bridge between silence and sound had finally held. And in that quiet park, no judges, no lawyers, no audience, just the hum of spring air and a girl learning to speak again. Malia drew a picture of courage. Of a girl. And her dog. And the signal that saved them both.